Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Ford Ranger, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster-Direct Connect baseplate kit with removable arms. But before we get into that, why don't we just take a minute, check this out, and make sure it's going to be the right setup for it. Before we jump right in and start talking about the baseplate, I figured it'd be beneficial just to kind of touch base and refresh ourselves on the main parts we're going to need to flat tow our Ranger down the road in the first place. There's going to be a total of 5 main components that you're going to need. First one is the base plate. That's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up. Tow bar is going to be that second part, and this is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of our truck to the back of our motorhome. Third main part will be safety cables, and those are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. Fourth main component will be your tow bar wiring, and what this is going to do is transfer lighting functions from the back of your coach to the back of your truck, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system. And what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Ranger whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, bringing you to a more complete and predictable stop. There's 2 other parts that I always like to recommend for the Ranger as well. One of them is called a battery charge line kit. And what that's going to do is essentially trickle charge or maintain your truck's battery whenever you're flat towing it. And that's necessary in a sense because your supplemental braking system uses power from the Ranger's battery, and over time it can deplete the energy in the battery and leave you stranded with a dead battery. And something else I recommend is what's called a brake light relay. And what that's going to do with how the Ranger's set up, let's say if you're all hooked up and you're making a turn, let's say you got your left turn signal on at a stop sign. So the back of your truck, it should have a brake light on one side and the left turn signal going on the other side. Without the brake light relay, the turn signal is overridden. So the back of the truck would just have brake lights on, and then your motorhome would have a turn signal going. It's just confusing, and it's not the right way to do things. So having a brake light relay will solve that issue and let people around you know what's going on. This is what your truck's going to look like whenever you're not flat towing it and you're not hooked up to your motorhome. And I feel like that's important because chances are good you're not always going to be flat towing, right? And with this setup, it's not bad at all. Nothing looks out of place really. Since the base plate essentially just replaces the tow hooks, it's nothing too different than what was originally there in the first place. So, in terms of the appearance, not bad at all. Really can't go wrong. And I also like the fact that they give you some extras. They give you a bracket that you can use to set up your wiring. Here's kind of a better look at that bracket. And, the small things really go a long way when you're setting these up. So it gives you a perfect spot, looks good, and just makes it easier to use in general. Kind of speaking of ease of use, that's something that's really important too. You don't want a complicated setup every time you want to flat tow. And the base plate uses removable arms, which are these. And so when you are ready to hook up, you're going to take these, rotate it about a quarter turn. It'll lock into place. Do the same thing for the other side. And now you're going to have your attachment point ready for your tow bar. Since these are a direct connect type base plate, all you're going to have to do is take your tow bar, line it up, put the pin through, roll the clip on the other side. Everything's easy to get to, and the safety chain openings there, and you'd set all your other components up, and that's really all there is to it. The base plate will pair up with Roadmaster tow bars, as well as some of the other manufacturers as well. They're kind of starting to put different ends on them and allow the different brand tow bar to pair up with the Roadmaster base plate. And if you already have a tow bar, a different brand or something like that, chances are really good you can pick up just an adapter that will allow the two to pair together. This is what your setup can look like once you're all hooked up and everything, and I like it. Everything's organized, easy to see, easy to get to. The base plate arms are spaced, relatively far apart, so it's gonna You know, that should help the truck track a little bit better behind the motorhome and stay a little more true and straight whenever you're going down the road. So a good setup, you know. One thing I do want to touch base on, which is really important, and the base plate is going to partially determine this, is if you're going to need a high-low adapter. All right, and you want your tow bar to be level. That way it can do its job, you know, and you'll get maximum performance out of it and your car will ride good. And to determine that, park your truck and your motorhome on level ground, kind of something like this, about how you'd want to hook it up. And you want to measure from the center of the pinhole there down to the ground. Remember that measurement and then move over to your motorhome's hitch. On your motorhome, you'll measure from the center of your hitch pinhole down to the ground, and you want the base plate measurement and the hitch measurement to be within 3 inches of each other. If it falls outside of that range, that's when you need a high-low adapter. So in our case, we have a 4-inch one here, drops it down just about level with our truck's base plate to make sure the tow bar is level. And just for kind of a reference on our truck, the base plate height was about 15.5 inches. Now keep in mind that can vary a little bit depending on, you know, what model you have, if it's lifted or bigger tires and things of that nature. But I at least wanted to give you a general idea on what our setup was like. Other than that, at the end of the day, you know, a really nice setup. One you really can't go wrong with. I'm a fan of Roadmaster products. They just seem to work and fit good, and you know, you get the performance you'd expect. You know, looks good and easy to use, so you really can't ask for too much more. As far as the installation goes, this one isn't too bad. You have to remove your bumper, not really a huge deal. You know, you don't really have to modify a ton of things or anything like that. So one of the easier base plates for sure, but still take you a little bit of time to do it. But if you like to see how it's done, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead, pull into the garage, and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the front of our truck, and we're going to have to remove our bumper. So along this bottom edge, we're going to have a total of 5 fasteners, and we'll pull them out using a 10mm socket. Now in this opening here, we're going to have some more fasteners. If you have a front license plate like we do, we'll pull out these screws. These are just a 10mm head. And you can switch out for a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to have these push pins that run along. So you can pry underneath the head of it and then pull the base out. Just work your way across. There'll be a total of 5 of these. If you have a front plate, you're going to have to temporarily remove it. So if you kind of lift up on it, there's just a plastic keeper, I guess you could call it, in there. And you can take a flathead or a trim tool, whatever you got. Just going to try to pry this out. You have one on each side. I undid the other one already. I'm going to pop back in. Essentially, this will just slide off and we can set it to the side. At this point, we can remove this portion of our grill, and this is just kind of snapped into place with some clips, and it's in there really tight, so it's going to take some force to actually pull this off. I did spray some soapy water along all the seams there just to help kind of give it some lubrication. It seems to help a little bit. So I'm just going to start on the corner here, pull straight out. And once I get to about this point, I'll come over to the other side and do the same thing. Kind of work this free. Usually when this unsnaps, the whole piece is going to come out pretty quick, so just keep that in mind. And if we have any wiring here, we can disconnect it. So just push down on that center tab there. Same thing for this one. We can set this to the side. If any of these metal keepers got stuck in the bumper, you can take them out. You can usually just kind of push them behind them and then grab some needle nose, squeeze the middle of it, pull these out, and then just push these back onto that plastic grill that we removed onto the tabs that go in there. So those will just slide back on. That way when we go to reinstall it, they'll just pop back into place. Remove this little plastic cover, kind of just pull down on it, slide it off. And from this point on, anything we do to one side of our car, we're going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. And then we can remove these 21mm nuts. These are actually holding our bumper on. So I got the other side, the other nuts removed already. And I left one on hand tight. And I'll grab our socket and pull these off as well. Before I take this one off, I'm just going to put one back on hand tight. That way, you know, we have some control here of the bumper and it don't just come falling off on us. This metal rock guard, so your truck might have a plastic one or be set up a little different. We'll remove this. It's held in place with 4 15mm head bolts. These back two, you actually don't have to remove all the way because this is slotted. Just loosen them up a little bit. You should be able to slide this off and out of the way. With the rock guard out of the way, we notice another fastener, one on each side, attaching this piece of plastic to this metal bracket. So we'll remove that using an 8mm socket. With all that done, now we should be able to slide our bumper off. So we'll pull straight back on it and be careful. You might have some wiring that you need to disconnect, which in our case it looks like we're gonna have some right up here in this pocket. Here's the connector. And if you push down on the center of that tab, it'll release. And now we should be in pretty good shape to set our bumper off to the side. We're gonna go ahead and remove our tow hooks now. And these are not gonna be replaced, or reinstalled rather. But there's 2 15mm head bolts holding them in. If you look at the outside of your frame, you're going to have an existing hole right there, and we need to enlarge it. So I'm going to come in with a 9/16 drill bit and make that happen. And since now we have some bare metal, I suggest taking some spray paint just to put a coating on it, or even a paint stick will work, just to have something there giving it a coating. Now you want to grab the base plate, and these are side specific, so check your instructions. Quick way to tell though is you want the safety cable tabs to be facing towards the outside of the truck. And on the driver's side, which we're on now, we're going to be using this hole as an attachment. And on the passenger side, you'll use this one. So nothing crazy there. This bottom hole, what you're going to do, that's going to line up with this hole in the frame. And you're going to have these tabs that will eventually, we'll use that to bolt our rock guard back up. We're going to take one of the factory bolts that was holding our tow hook in, put red Loctite on the threads, and all the hardware holding the base plate on, you're going to want to use this red Loctite. It'll slide through, We'll line that on up and just get it started hand tight. Grab the bolt, put the red Loctite on it and a flat washer, and this is going to go through the base plate and through the frame, and you want to just get it started. Barely push it through, and that's because we're going to grab this pipe spacer and place that inside of the frame. That way our bolt can pass through it all the way out to the other side. So you can see where our bolt's coming through, and a trick that I've found to make this a little easier is grab a pair of vice grips and just grab the pipe spacer and kind of rotate this in there, push the bolt through it and out to the other side of the frame. Where the bolt comes out, you're going to take a flat washer, a split lock washer, and a nut, and get it started. You want to grab your rock guard and just slide this in place and just make sure the holes line up, because those brackets that we put on, you can move from front to back. So we just don't want to blindly tighten those down, and then, you know, when we go to put all this back together, these not line up. So just do a quick check if you need to, loosen up your bolts a little bit and maneuver it to where it'll line up. Get it hand tight, that way it'll stay there, and then we can carry on and continue to bolt everything up. We'll come back now and snug everything up. So I hit this one with our 15, and then the new one that we put in, you can use a 19 or 3/4. Want to hold one side from spinning. With everything snug, you want to make sure to come back with a torque wrench and torque all the hardware down to the amount specified in the instructions. It'd be a great time to install some of your other flat towing components, like your tow bar wiring and your braking system, while you have all this room to work. The Ranger is kind of unique in this case, being that the bumper will have to be back on to completely install some of those, but I think what I'm going to do is route some of our wiring and everything while we have all this space to kind of loosely get everything in place. And once we have that done, then we can kind of button everything back up. I want to mention they give you this bracket, and when we put the bumper on, this can slide over it and you can bolt that up, and that'll give you a spot to mount up your wiring connector if you're using a 6-way round one. So if you're routing those wires, just keep that in mind. You know it's going to be bolted up here in this location. So I'll go ahead and get started on that, and once we're ready, we can come back and show you how to get everything back together. Now that I have our wires routed and kind of set up for our diodes and other components, we'll get the bumper back on. So this will just slide back into place. Don't forget to plug in any electrical components that we might have undid, and we'll just reinstall this the opposite way. With the front bumper and everything put back on, finally I took our rock guard here and put that in place. If you try to push it up flat where it's originally bolted, it does make contact with the base plate a little bit. And so I'm just going to notch those little areas out some. That way it'll sit flush. So put it up, you know, lightly bolt it in, mark them out, and then we'll get that material removed. To get these cut out, I'm just going to use a Dremel tool and a grinding bit and carefully remove this material. Those notches worked out pretty good and gave us that clearance we needed to get our rock guard back up into position. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster-Direct Connect baseplate kit with removable arms on our 2022 Ford Ranger.